For weeks, my neighbor kept causing drama right outside my house. At first, I thought it was just a small annoyance, but it got worse. She wouldn't stop, no matter what I did. So, I came up with one crazy idea to finally put an end to it. And trust me, you won't believe how it all turned out. Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you'll see exactly how one simple plan changed everything. It all began like any other ordinary week. Nothing unusual, nothing out of the ordinary. At least that's what I thought. My neighborhood had always been fairly quiet. The kind of place where you expect kids to ride bikes in the street, neighbors to wave politely when they mow their lawns, and the occasional dog walker to pass by without incident. But slowly, I started noticing little things, strange things, that didn't sit right with me. The first time it happened, I didn't think much of it. I walked outside one morning, groggy from lack of sleep, and noticed that my trash can was tipped over on the curb. Garbage bags spilled out, a few rolling into the street. At first, I thought maybe it was raccoons. Or maybe the wind had blown too hard in the night. After all, accidents happen, right? But then it happened again, and again. At first, I chalked it up to bad luck, but after the fourth time, I started paying closer attention. I realized something. It wasn't just happening randomly. The timing was too suspicious. Always late at night or very early in the morning before most people were awake. And it wasn't just the trash can. Sometimes my small garden decorations would be slightly moved. A flower pot shifted. A solar light knocked out of the ground. Little things that felt like more than coincidence. Now I know what you're thinking. Maybe it was just some neighborhood kids playing a prank. Maybe someone walking by accidentally brushed against things. That was my first thought too. But then one night I stayed up late, sitting near my front window with the lights off. And what I saw made my jaw drop. My neighbor, the one everyone in the street whispered about as being a little difficult, was right there in front of my house. She didn't see me because I was in the shadows. She walked up to my trash can, gave it a little push with her foot, and down it went, spilling slightly onto the curb. Then she just walked away. No hesitation. No shame. Like it was the most normal thing in the world. I sat there frozen, trying to process what I'd just seen. Why on earth would she do that? I had barely spoken to her before. We weren't friends, sure, but we'd never had a fight either. As far as I knew, I'd never done anything to upset her, so why was she targeting me? The next morning, I tried to brush it off. Maybe she was drunk. Maybe she was having a bad day. But over the next week, it kept happening. Not just once or twice. Every single time I put my trash out, I would find it tipped over before the truck came by. Sometimes she would do it in broad daylight, pretending she accidentally bumped into it. Sometimes she would do it at night, sneaky, but not sneaky enough. That's when the frustration started creeping in. You know that feeling when someone pushes you again and again, even in a small way, and it builds up until you can't ignore it anymore? That's exactly how I felt. It wasn't just about a trash can anymore. It was about respect, or rather the complete lack of it. I remember one Saturday morning I walked outside to pick up the paper, and there it was again. Trash scattered everywhere, empty soda cans rolling down the street. A neighbor across the road saw me and asked, "Raccoons again?" I just smiled weakly and nodded, not wanting to admit the truth. Because how do you explain to someone that your grown neighbor is acting like a playground bully? The more it happened, the more I started noticing other signs too. Once my recycling bin was tipped over as well. Another time, she moved one of my garden chairs slightly out of place. Subtle, but I knew I hadn't left it like that. It became obvious she was going out of her way to mess with me. I thought about confronting her directly, marching over to her house, knocking on the door and asking, "What's your problem?" But something held me back. Maybe it was the fact that she had a reputation in the neighborhood for being confrontational. People called her a Karen behind her back, the kind of person who always complained about lawns not being mowed or cars parked in the wrong spot. I didn't want to make things worse. So instead, I decided to start observing more carefully. I set up my phone inside my window one evening, pointing it toward the street. Sure enough, around midnight, there she was again. This time, she didn't just push the can, she gave it a little kick, like she was daring me to notice. Watching the video later, I couldn't believe it. It felt surreal, like something out of a bad sitcom. That night, I sat in bed replaying the video over and over, asking myself, why? Why would she go out of her way to bother me? Was it boredom? Spite? Some kind of twisted sense of entertainment? Whatever the reason, I knew one thing for sure. It wasn't going to stop on its own. By now, my patience was running thin. I couldn't just keep cleaning up the mess every time. It was embarrassing, too. Other neighbors started noticing. One even joked, "Man, you've got some wild raccoons in your area." I forced a laugh, but inside I was boiling. I tried small fixes at first. I bought heavier trash cans, thinking maybe she'd give up if they were harder to move. Nope. She still managed to tip them over. I tried placing them closer to the house, right by the driveway. Didn't matter, she'd still make the effort. I even thought about putting up a polite sign. Please, do not touch the bins. But I knew someone like her would probably just laugh at it, or worse, take it as a challenge. Every time I walked outside and saw the mess, it was like a slap in the face. It made me feel powerless in my own home, and that was the worst part. A person's home is supposed to be their safe place. But here I was, constantly on edge, wondering what she'd do next. One night, as I was cleaning up spilled garbage yet again, I felt this mix of anger and determination. Enough was enough. If she wanted to play games, fine. But I wasn't going to just sit back and take it anymore. I didn't know it at the time, but that moment was the turning point. The frustration, the late nights, the constant little annoyances, they all added up. And they pushed me toward one simple truth. It was time to fight back. Not with shouting, not with drama, but with something smarter, something she would never see coming. And so, with that thought in my mind, I began planning. After weeks of frustration, I finally reached a point where I knew I had to do something. I couldn't just keep watching from the window, shaking my head every time my neighbor struck again. But at the same time, I wasn't ready to jump straight into a confrontation. I wanted to believe there might be a simpler fix, something that didn't involve turning this into a full-on neighborhood war. So, I started small. My first idea was to place a sign. I figured, maybe she just needed a little reminder, a polite message that would make her think twice. So I printed one out, bold letters on a bright yellow sheet. Please do not touch. Thank you, I laminated it, taped it onto the trash can, and even added a small smiley face at the bottom to soften the tone. The next morning, I walked outside with a little bit of hope. But as soon as I saw the can tipped over again, my heart sank. The sign was still there, but the way it was scratched and bent made it clear she had seen it and ignored it completely. That was strike one. Still, I didn't give up. I thought maybe the problem wasn't the sign, but the fact that the bins were too easy to move. So, I went online and ordered 2 brand new trash cans. Bigger, stronger, heavier. Ones with locking lids that claimed to be animal-proof. When they arrived, I set them up proudly at the curb, thinking there was no way she'd be able to move them without putting in serious effort. Well, I was wrong. The very first night, she came by again. I didn't even have to guess. I caught her on camera. This time, she leaned her whole body into it, pushing with both hands, and sure enough, the can toppled right over. I sat there watching the footage, stunned. She was so determined to mess with me that she was willing to put in that much effort. Who does that? At this point, my frustration was boiling. I couldn't wrap my head around it. Was she really getting some kind of joy out of this? Did she wake up every morning and think, you know what would make me happy today? Knocking over my neighbor's trash can. It was absurd. But the evidence was right there in front of me. So, I tried again. This time, I thought maybe if I moved the cans closer to my house, she'd get the message. I tucked them right against the driveway, practically touching the wall, so she would have to walk further in just to reach them. I figured she'd either feel too awkward to do it, or she'd give up out of pure inconvenience. But of course, she didn't. The next night, she came creeping along the sidewalk like usual, glanced around to see if anyone was watching, and then walked right up my driveway as if it were her own. Without hesitation, she gave the bin a shove, and down it went again. The audacity was unreal. By now, it wasn't just about the mess anymore. It was about principle. The way she acted like she could do whatever she wanted, no consequences, no one to stop her, it infuriated me. And the worst part? If I told anyone, they'd probably think I was overreacting. It's just a trash can, they'd say. But to me, it was more than that. It was a symbol of how she disrespected me, my property, and the idea of being a decent neighbor. Still, I kept searching for small solutions. Next, I thought maybe I could catch her red-handed. If I confronted her in the moment, maybe she'd be embarrassed enough to stop. So one evening, I set up a chair just inside my garage, cracked the door open slightly, and sat there in the dark, waiting. I had my phone ready to record, my flashlight ready to shine, just in case. I waited and waited. Hours passed. Around midnight, I heard footsteps outside. My pulse quickened. I peeked through the gap, and there she was, walking straight toward the trash can. My heart was pounding. This was it. I finally had her. But just as I was about to swing the door open and confront her, she stopped. She looked around suspiciously, almost like she sensed something. Then, without touching the bin, she turned and walked back the other way. I sat there in disbelief. Had she seen me? Heard me? Was she really that sharp? Or was it just dumb luck? Either way, my plan was a failure. Strike 3. Not ready to give up, I tried one more idea. This time I decided to install a small, motion-activated camera right above the bins. That way I'd have undeniable proof, not just grainy footage from my window, but clear, up-close evidence. I mounted the camera discreetly, angled it perfectly, and waited. The very first night, it worked like a charm. She walked up, shoved the bin over, and the camera caught everything, crystal clear. I watched the playback the next morning and shook my head in disbelief. There she was, plain as day, wearing her oversized jacket and slippers, casually knocking over my trash, as if it were the most normal thing in the world. For a moment, I felt a strange satisfaction. I finally had solid proof. But then, reality set in. What good was this proof, really? If I showed it to her, she'd probably deny it or make some excuse. If I showed it to the authorities, would they even care? After all, it wasn't exactly a serious crime. It was just petty, annoying, infuriating, but not something anyone else would take seriously. And that's when it hit me. All my small fixes had failed. The polite sign didn't work. The heavier cans didn't work. Moving them closer to my house didn't work. Even catching her on video didn't solve the problem. If anything, all it did was prove how stubborn and determined she was. That night, I sat in my living room staring at the footage again, watching her smug little push, watching her walk away without a care in the world. And that's when the thought entered my mind. Maybe it was time to stop playing nice. Maybe it was time to outsmart her in a way she wouldn't expect. I didn't know it yet, but that was the beginning of my craziest plan. After all the failed attempts, I realized one thing very clearly. If I wanted this neighbor drama to end, I couldn't rely on small fixes anymore. No more polite signs. No more moving trash cans around like some kind of chess game. I needed something bigger, smarter, something that wouldn't just frustrate her, but would make her think twice before ever messing with me again. That thought kept me awake for nights. I would lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, imagining different scenarios. I'd think, what if I booby-trapped the trash can? What if I set up a motion alarm? What if I created something that looked normal, but had a hidden surprise waiting for her? The possibilities were endless, but I needed an idea that was clever without crossing the line into anything dangerous or illegal. I didn't want revenge in the form of harm. I just wanted justice, the kind that would teach her a lesson and let me finally have peace in my own home. So, I did what anyone with too much frustration and too much free time does. I went down the rabbit hole of the internet. I spent hours scrolling through forums, DIY pages, even prank websites. Some ideas were too extreme. Others were too weak. But every now and then I'd find a spark of inspiration. One idea that stuck with me was the concept of a surprise mechanism. Something that seemed ordinary, but once tampered with, it would spring into action. I thought about using sound, maybe a loud horn that would blast the moment the bin was touched. Imagine her casually walking up, giving the can a little push, and suddenly, bam, a siren goes off, echoing through the street. The mental image made me smile. But then I thought about the consequences. What if it woke up the whole neighborhood? I'd be the one everyone got mad at, not her. So I scratched that idea off the list. Next, I thought about motion-activated sprinklers. They sell them online as a way to keep animals out of gardens. The second anything moves in front of them, a strong spray of water shoots out. The idea of my neighbor getting soaked in the middle of the night was tempting. Hilarious even, but it felt a little too obvious. Plus, I wasn't sure if it would actually reach the trash cans at the curb. I wanted something subtle. Something that didn't just punish her in the moment, but made her second-guess herself forever. That's when it hit me. What if I built a trap inside the trash can itself? Something invisible from the outside, but ready to surprise her the second she touched it. My mind started racing. I grabbed a notebook and began sketching ideas. A weighted lid that would slam shut. A hidden device that made a sudden sound, even something as simple as a mechanism that caused the bin to fight back when pushed. The more I thought about it, the more excited I became. This wasn't just about trash cans anymore. It was about outsmarting someone who thought they were untouchable. I decided to combine a few ideas into one ultimate setup. Here was the plan. 1. I would take one of my bins and modify it so it looked perfectly normal from the outside. 2. Inside, I would install a simple motion-activated gadget, something small but effective. 3. The device would trigger a harmless but startling reaction the second she tried to tip it over. I knew exactly where to find the parts. The next day, I drove to a hardware store, wandering the aisles with a cart. I picked up a small motion sensor, a cheap portable speaker, some duct tape, a set of LED lights, and a few other odds and ends. To anyone watching, it looked like I was preparing for some kind of science fair project, but in reality, I was building the neighbor-proof trash can. Back home, I got to work. I cleared space in my garage, set the bin on its side, and carefully measured where everything would go. The motion sensor was the most important part. It needed to be positioned so that the second the bin was touched, it would activate. I tested it over and over again, waving my hand in front of it, making sure it was sensitive enough to catch even the slightest movement. Next, I connected it to the portable speaker. The sound I chose was ridiculous on purpose, a loud, distorted meow mixed with static. I figured it would be confusing enough to make her jump without being so loud that the whole block came running. Plus, there was something funny about the idea of a trash can hissing like an angry cat. Finally, I added the LED lights. They were hidden inside, but once triggered, they would flash red, glowing through the cracks of the bin like some kind of alien device. It was over the top, sure, but that was the point. I wanted her to feel like she had just unleashed something she couldn't explain. When I finished, I stepped back and admired my creation. On the outside, it looked like any ordinary trash can. But inside, it was a ticking time bomb of confusion, ready to go off the moment she touched it. Of course, I had to test it. So, late that night, I set it up outside and gave it a gentle push. Instantly, the speaker blared its distorted meow, and the red lights flickered to life. Even though I knew it was coming, it startled me. I laughed out loud, imagining her face when it happened to her. But the best part? It reset automatically after a few seconds. which meant every single time she tried, it would trigger again. For days, I fine-tuned the setup, making sure it wouldn't accidentally go off from cars driving by or people walking their dogs. I adjusted the angle, tested the battery life, even added a backup power source just in case. By the time I was done, it was flawless. And then, the waiting game began. Every night I checked my cameras. Every morning I inspected the bin. For a while, nothing happened. Part of me worried that maybe she had given up, that all my effort would go to waste. But deep down, I knew her habits too well. She wouldn't stay away forever. Sure enough, a week later, I saw her on the footage again. It was late, past midnight. She shuffled down the sidewalk like usual, glancing around, making sure no one was watching. My heart was pounding as I watched her approach the bin. She reached out, her hand gripping the edge, ready to push. And that's when it happened. The moment her hand touched the can, the hidden system came to life. The distorted meow blasted from inside, echoing in the quiet night, and the red lights flared up, glowing through the cracks like fire. She jumped back instantly, nearly tripping over the curb. For a split second, her face froze in pure shock, and then she turned and hurried away, looking over her shoulder like she had just seen a ghost. I couldn't stop laughing. It was everything I had hoped for and more. But the best part wasn't just her reaction in that moment. It was what came after. Because from that night on, she never touched my trash cans again. The night my plan finally went into action was one of the most nerve-wracking but also most exciting nights of my life. I had spent weeks dealing with her petty antics, days researching and building my setup, and hours testing it again and again. But now, it all came down to this one moment. I remember sitting in my living room, staring at the monitor where my camera feed played. The street outside was quiet, almost too quiet. It was past midnight and most of the neighborhood was asleep. The glow from the streetlights cast long shadows across the sidewalk, and the air had that heavy stillness that makes even the tiniest sound feel loud. I had positioned my trash can perfectly at the curb, looking completely normal. On the outside, there was no sign that anything had changed. To anyone passing by, it was just a regular bin waiting for collection. But I knew what was inside, waiting for her. Minutes felt like hours as I watched the screen. My heart beat faster every time a shadow passed, every time I thought I saw movement. I almost convinced myself that maybe she wasn't going to show up. Maybe she had finally given up. But deep down, I knew better. She was too consistent, too predictable. If there was one thing I could count on, it was her urge to mess with me. And then, just like clockwork, she appeared. She came shuffling down the sidewalk, wearing that same oversized jacket, her hands stuffed into the pockets. She glanced left, then right, checking the street like she always did. The way she moved was almost comical, like a cartoon villain sneaking around. I leaned closer to the screen, barely breathing. This was it. She approached the bin slowly, her eyes scanning as if she sensed something was different. For a moment, I worried she might not touch it. Maybe she would sense the trap. But then, almost like she couldn't help herself, she reached out and grabbed the side of the bin. The second her hand made contact, the trap triggered. A loud, distorted meow blasted from inside, mixed with static that made it sound almost otherworldly. At the same time, the hidden LEDs flared up, casting an eerie red glow that leaked out through the cracks of the lid. It looked like the bin itself had come alive. Her reaction was priceless. She stumbled backward, her eyes wide with shock. She raised her hands like she had just touched something electrified. For a split second, she froze, staring at the glowing bin in disbelief. And then she did exactly what I hoped she would. She bolted. She spun around and half ran, half tripped down the sidewalk, glancing over her shoulder every few steps. The look on her face was a mix of confusion, fear, and embarrassment. And I sat there, watching on my monitor, trying not to laugh too loudly and wake up the whole house. In that moment, all the frustration I had built up over the weeks melted away. Every spilled bag of garbage, every knocked-over decoration, every time I felt powerless, it was all worth it just to see that one reaction. But here's the best part. It worked. The very next morning, I went outside expecting the usual mess. But to my surprise, the bin was standing perfectly upright, untouched. For the first time in weeks, I didn't have to pick up trash from the street. It felt almost surreal. Still, I didn't want to get my hopes up too quickly. Maybe she had just skipped one night. Maybe she would be back. So I left the setup in place and waited. The following night, I checked the footage again. She walked by, like usual. She glanced at the bin. She even slowed down for a moment. But instead of reaching out, she kept walking. I couldn't believe it. My crazy idea had actually worked. Night after night, the same thing happened. Sometimes she'd glance at the bin, but she never touched it again. It was like that one encounter had been enough to break her nerve completely. She didn't know what she had triggered or how it had happened, but she clearly didn't want to risk it again. And just like that, the drama ended. For the first time in what felt like forever, I could relax in my own home without worrying about waking up to another mess. My mornings went back to being normal. No more embarrassment, no more frustration, just peace and quiet, the way it should have been from the start. Looking back, it still amazes me how something so small turned into such a big deal. On the surface, it was just a neighbor knocking over a trash can. But the truth is, it was never just about the trash. It was about respect. It was about boundaries, and it was about refusing to let someone else's negativity control my life. The crazy plan I came up with didn't just stop her, it gave me back a sense of control. It reminded me that sometimes you don't need to fight fire with fire. Sometimes you just need to be clever. And honestly, it felt good. Now, whenever I see her walking down the street, I can't help but smile a little. She avoids my curb completely, like the bin is cursed. And every time I roll it out for collection, I feel this quiet satisfaction knowing that she'll never touch it again. In the end, I didn't need to confront her directly. I didn't need to cause a scene. All it took was one crazy idea and a little creativity to finally put an end to weeks of pointless drama. And if there's one lesson I learned from all this, it's that sometimes the best revenge isn't loud or violent. It's clever, quiet, and unforgettable. So, if you're ever stuck dealing with someone who just won't stop pushing your buttons, remember, you don't always need to fight back the way they expect. Sometimes, the smartest move is the one they never see coming. And that's exactly how my neighbor's drama finally ended. So that's the story of how I dealt with my neighbor once and for all. It might sound crazy, but honestly, it worked better than anything else I tried. If you've ever had to deal with a difficult neighbor, I'm sure you can relate. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this with someone who needs a good laugh. Because trust me, this isn't the last crazy story I'll be sharing. If you like this video, please subscribe our channel and tell us in the comment box which country and city you are watching this video from.